Though it was broadcast for free by us here at ADH, CPAC is characteristically unfiltered, and a lot of the speeches were delivered as candidly as if they were being delivered to only the 1,000 people in the room and not the tens of thousands watching for free on ADH TV. It was very refreshing to be in good company where free speech prevailed. It was a stark contrast to this moment, almost exactly 2 years ago. This was Town Hall Square on George Street, about a kilometre from Sydney Star Casino, on July 24, 2021. If you look really closely, you'll see me dressed inappropriately for a protest march right in the middle. It looks like I'm walking towards the cops, but in fact I'm walking backwards, as is everyone else, because the mounted police had just rushed in to save one of their colleagues. Seconds earlier, me and several other protesters had formed a circle around a lone police officer who had found himself isolated in the hostile crowd, and a gang of masked Antifa-like thugs who were there to cause trouble looked almost certain to pounce on him. Certainly the look on the cop's face confirmed that he was briefly in serious danger. There were times during that day when the mood was extremely tense. The crowd was unpredictable and the cops were understandably nervous. But the funny thing is that I wound up on the homepage of The Guardian and a bunch of other newspapers around the world looking like I was trying to incite a riot. Looks are deceptive. A Guardian journalist who I used to work with at The Australian many years ago recognised me from the photo and called me, expecting me to be ashamed about having been at the rally, which was against the law at the time, and for joining the crazy anti-vaxxers who, want to kill everyone's granny because they were suspicious about experimental medicines. You're siding with Big Pharma against working people who are losing their jobs and businesses? I asked the Guardian journalist. My quotes didn't make it into the story. I guess I just didn't fit the Guardian's narrative. The only person on that Freedom March that day with any public profile at all at the time was John Ruddick, well known in Sydney political circles as a libertarian reformer. He tweeted a few videos on the day about how much fun it was to be on the march, and I can confirm that. It was, in fact, one of the most multicultural and pleasant and happy and joyous occasions I'd been to, certainly since the start of the lockdown, but in Sydney for years. It was a really fun experience and everyone was getting on with each other. We'd come from all over Sydney just to defend our freedom. Anyway, Ruddick's tweets sparked an avalanche of hatred towards him. Former Channel 10 reporter Pawle said Ruddick would be, quote, probably on a ventilator within a week. Of course, this event was being dubbed a super spreader event. And Zali Steggall, his own federal MP from the seat of Warringah, told him not to return to the electorate and advised her brainwashed supporters to, quote, name, shame and fine anyone identified from the march. When these idiots test positive, they are on their own, unquote. Very nice, Zali. How highly you think of your fellow citizens. The march was the biggest public gathering since the start of the lockdown in Sydney, and it was dubbed by idiotic politicians as a super spreader event. These politicians weren't just drunk on power, they were higher than Keith Richards in a Burmese opium den. New South Wales Health Minister or Health official Kerry Chant had only that week told us not to talk to our neighbours should we see them at the shops, and Health Minister Brad Hazzard said COVID was, quote, the most potent virus we've had probably on Earth, unquote. Bit alarming. Premier Gladys Berejiklian said, "We should only leave the house if we really have to." Oh, we had to, all right, Gladys. The freedoms previous generations died fighting and defending for were on the line. And as anyone with half a brain knew, we were safer from viruses outdoors than we were indoors, which is where our overlords, ironically, wanted us to be. The next 3 weeks were pretty amusing because idiotic journalists rocked up to those daily news conferences where the latest inflated contagion and casualty figures were being robotically delivered by Kerry Chant and asked her if any of the latest cases could be traced back to the Freedom March super spreader event. John Ruddock was watching all this from home and panicking. He thought that they'd make up a connection, that they'd connect the Freedom March to some of the latest statistics. After all, why wouldn't they? Most of the other statistics were fictional. But to their credit, Ruddock told me today, they didn't. Good on him. But he did cop more than his share of vitriol. Ruddock's kids were barred from their North Sydney primary school for 2 months. Strangers who got their hands on his phone number would call him and abuse him almost daily for infecting their suburb. And of course, the cops knocked on his door and issued him with a $1,000 fine. All this fortified Ruddock's determination to become an elected Member of Parliament with the Liberal Democrats, now known as the Libertarian Party, a goal he achieved at the last New South Wales state election in March this year. Ruddock is one of the few politicians in the entire country calling for a royal commission into the COVID and vaccine lunacy. Another one is Victorian Senator Ralph Babbitt of the United Australia Party, who formally proposed a COVID royal commission this month.
Now, we must not let them get away with what they did during the pandemic, the human rights abuses, the weaponisation of fear, the lockdowns, the closing of borders, and obviously the inhumane vaccine mandates. Unexplained excess mortality is the elephant in the room. Cancer, diabetes, dementia, cardiovascular-related deaths, it's all spiked. Now, I have previously attempted to create a committee to investigate this, but it was voted down by almost every single senator in this place. What a shame that was. We'll never forget. Now, we call on the Labor government to honour their promise, honour the promise, establish a royal commission into the pandemic response immediately. You said it should happen. You previously said it should happen. You said it was the right thing to do. You promised it as soon as practicable. Let's give people answers. Establish a royal commission now. Let's make sure that this never happens again. Let's protect our people from gross mismanagement.
Thank you, Senator.
If you ever doubted that Australia was ruled by a uniparty, check this out. This is Anne Ruston explaining why the previous government, the Morrison government, handled the COVID pandemic well.
The former coalition government, I believe, acted swiftly during the pandemic to ensure our health systems had the capacity to protect Australians. It's believed that over 40,000 lives were saved by that quick response.
It's believed? Believed by who? And whoever they are, maybe they'd like to explain how they arrived at this figure in front of a royal commission. Of course, Ruston's defence of the previous government is backed by Labor, who all voted down Babbitt's proposal.